For centuries, European society measured human worth strictly by two rigid metrics: the purity of your noble bloodlines and your pursuit of divine salvation. The traditional theological view held that earthly fame, the great desire to excel and be remembered by mortal men, was an empty, dangerous vanity that distracted the soul from God. But as the feudal system collapsed in the Italian city-states, a societal crisis emerged. A new class of educated, urban citizens began living side by side with the old nobility. These merchants and bankers held immense wealth and political power, yet they lacked the one thing that traditionally mattered: aristocratic lineage. These new urban elites required a radical new metric to validate their existence. They needed a way to measure a successful life and celebrate human greatness without relying on a duke's pedigree or waiting for heavenly judgment. On April 8, 1341, a crowd gathered amidst the ancient ruins of the Roman capital. A poet named Petrarch stepped forward. He was formally crowned with a wreath of bay laurel leaves. He was a writer, not a military conqueror or a bishop. By accepting this wreath, he was resurrecting a long-dead Roman civic honor meant exclusively to reward literary genius. This highly visible public relations stunt effectively ended the feudal system's monopoly on greatness. From this point on, a brilliant mind could grant a commoner the same social gravity as a king. The Renaissance didn't invent entirely new rituals of celebration out of thin air. Instead, Italians systematically hijacked the mechanics of religious devotion and applied them directly to secular fame. The medieval hunt for the sacred relics and bones of saints was replaced by a frantic search for the skeletons of classical authors. Alfonso the Great, the King of Naples, actually received what he believed was the arm bone of the Roman historian Livy, parading it into the city with the exact same solemn pomp usually reserved for holy martyrs. Holy pilgrimages shifted too. Rather than traveling exclusively to monastic cells, cultured Italians began journeying to the birthplaces and homes of famous writers and jurists. Petrarch's private estate at Arquois was carefully preserved by the city, dotted with graceful villas and treated as a revered destination for these cultured pilgrims. By treating a poet's house like a saint's shrine, society demonstrated that human potential and intellect were now viewed as sacred. This gave rise to humanism, the radical idea that true nobility is based entirely on personal excellence and intellect, rather than generations of aristocratic ancestry. Italian despots needed intellectual elites to legitimize their rule. The prince provided wealth, and the poet manufactured his reputation. Humanists were dangerous to cross. Because they wrote the history books, they decided which rulers earned historical fame and which were abandoned to oblivion. This dynamic made the intellectual as essential to a regime as the soldier. It elevated the pen to equal status with the sword, because without the scholar's endorsement, even a military victory would eventually be forgotten. In the traditional medieval afterlife, classical pagans were strictly confined to limbo, regardless of their earthly virtues. By the 15th century, the cultural concept of the afterlife morphed to seamlessly merge the Christian heaven with a classical pantheon of heroes. When the Florentine leader Cosimo de' Medici died, contemporary poetry depicted him bypassing a standard choir of angels to be actively welcomed into heaven but active, celebrated participation alongside the greatest minds in history. This obsession with earthly glory culminated in a coronation craze. Cities like Florence began crowning their famous humanist scholars with laurel wreaths on their deathbeds. The physical manifestation of this worship appeared right inside the churches. Magnificent tombs were erected for these thinkers in the vast architectural spaces previously reserved for saints. Today, whenever we celebrate a self-made innovator or a visionary artist over inherited status, we are living in the meritocracy built by the cult of the Laurel Crown.